There's a question being asked in every wealthy country on earth right now, in kitchens in London, in apartments in Seoul, in shared houses in Sydney, in rental properties in Toronto, in studios in Tokyo, in the comments of every video that mentions the cost of living, the housing market, or the state of the economy. The question is always some version of the same thing. How is anyone supposed to afford this? And more specifically, the version that nobody says out loud at work but everyone says at home, how is anyone supposed to afford a child? Not a fleet of children, not the big family the previous generation assumed would happen, just one child, one person you're responsible for, one extra mouth and set of needs. In 2026, across every wealthy country in the world, the data is converging on the same answer. For a growing percentage of people who want children, the financial math does not work. Not because they are bad with money, not because they made poor choices, because the baseline cost of adding one human being to your life has risen faster than any wage increase, any government benefit, or any financial planning advice can compensate for. This is the wealth records. And today we are going to explain why birth rates are falling in every wealthy country simultaneously, and why the answer is not that young people have become selfish, distracted, or insufficiently committed to the future. The answer is that they did the math, and the math came back negative. If you are new here, hit subscribe, because today is the video that explains the thing. Politicians keep calling a birth rate crisis while refusing to acknowledge the price tag that caused it. The price tag that everyone can see and nobody in power wants to read out loud. Drop below. Do you want children, but feel you cannot afford them right now? Or did the financial calculation change your plans? Just your country, and yes or no? We are mapping the real fertility crisis in the comments. Every country. Drop yours. Let's start with the number. Because there is a global number, and it is alarming. Replacement rate, the number of children per woman a population needs to sustain itself, is 2.1. Not grow, just sustain, just replace the people who die with roughly the same number of new ones. Below 2.1, a population shrinks, slowly at first, then faster as there are fewer potential parents. In 2026, 37 of the 38 OECD member countries are below replacement rate. 37 out of 38. Every wealthy country on earth except Israel is failing to replace itself. The United States is projected at 1.53 in 2026. The UK is at 1.4. Australia is at 1.48. Canada hit a historic low of 1.25 in 2024. France recorded more deaths than births in 2025 for the first time since World War II. Italy is at 1.2. Spain is at 1.19. South Korea is at 0.75. 0.75. In Seoul, the capital, the fertility rate fell to 0.64. That is not a society failing to grow. That is a society in active population decline, at a speed that no modern economy has ever had to plan around. South Korea has spent more than $270 billion since 2005 on pro-natal policies, cash payments, childcare subsidies, housing incentives, subsidized IVF. The fertility rate when the first plan launched, 1.1. In 2026, 0.75. More money, fewer babies. Every year for 20 years, the money has not worked, because the money did not address the underlying economic structure that made children unaffordable. It just added a payment on top of a structure that was still producing the same answer. Now let's talk about what it actually costs to have a child, because the number is very large. In the United States, the baseline cost to raise a single child to 18 is estimated to exceed $320,000 in 2026, not counting higher education. In the UK, the Child Poverty Action Group calculated the cost of raising a child to 18 at £290,000 for a couple, including reasonable extras like school trips, hobbies, and birthday presents. Not luxury, birthday presents, and school trips. In Australia, researchers estimating costs in 2026 found that 4 children could very well equal one parent's entire salary. Not the combined household income, one person's salary, just children. These are not outlier estimates. These are what responsible researchers are finding when they add up housing adjusted for an extra person, food, clothing, healthcare, childcare, transport to school, education costs, toys, activities, and the 1,000 other daily costs that people who do not have children sometimes forget to include in the calculation. Children are expensive. They have always been expensive. What has changed is the ratio. The ratio between what a child costs and what a household earns has been moving in the wrong direction for 3 decades in every wealthy country simultaneously. Now let's talk about what the decision actually looks like from the inside, because the birth rate data is a number. The decision is a conversation. The conversation usually happens around age 27 or 28, sometimes earlier, sometimes later, but there is a moment. The moment when someone sits down and tries to make the finances work, not in an abstract future sense, in an actual current sense. This month, this year, the rent is this, the income is that, the savings are somewhere between those two numbers. And then someone adds the cost of a child. Not all the costs, just the obvious ones. The childcare while both parents work, the larger accommodation you will need. The loss of one income while someone takes parental leave, if parental leave exists and is paid. The hospital costs in countries where those are not covered, just the obvious ones. And the spreadsheet changes in a way that does not resolve. The problem with the spreadsheet is that it is not a spreadsheet of wants. It is a spreadsheet of math. You cannot negotiate with the math. You cannot will the math into different numbers. You can earn more, which takes time. You can spend less, which has limits. Or you can delay, which is what most people do. Delay until later, when things will presumably be better. The average age of first-time mothers has been rising in every wealthy country for 20 years. In Australia, the average age of mothers is now 32.1, fathers 33.9. In the UK, the average age at first birth passed 31 in recent years and keeps climbing. The delay is not a rejection of parenthood. It is a queuing system. A queue formed by people waiting for the financial conditions to improve. The financial conditions are not improving fast enough for everyone in the queue. Some people leave the queue because the biological window is closed while they were waiting. Some people leave the queue because the conditions improved, but only partially and only later. Some people leave the queue having concluded that the conditions are not going to improve enough. None of these are personal failures. All of them are rational responses to a real set of conditions. The birth rate does not capture why people left the queue, just how many of them did. Now let's talk about childcare specifically, because childcare is the trigger event, the thing that converts the question, might we have a child, into how can we possibly have a child? Childcare costs went up 29% between 2020 and 2024 in the United States alone. 29% in 4 years. At the same time, wages did not go up 29%. In Australia, childcare costs for working parents are one of the most significant budget items in the household, often exceeding the mortgage payment. More than the mortgage. For a service that is simultaneously unaffordable for parents and financially unsustainable for the providers running it. The childcare center that charges $2,000 a month is often barely breaking even. The money is not going to profit. It is going to structural costs. In the UK, the childcare sector has been in crisis for years, with providers closing because the government funding rates do not cover the cost of delivering the service, which produces fewer places, which drives prices higher, which reduces fertility further. Childcare is the clearest example of a market that has failed everyone simultaneously. The parent cannot afford it. The provider cannot sustain it. The government will not fully fund it. And the child, who would exist if the first two problems were solved, does not get born. Now let's talk about housing. Because housing is the foundation that everything else sits on. You do not have a second bedroom before you have a second person to put in it. In most major cities across the wealthy world, the second bedroom costs enough to make the maths of a child nearly impossible for anyone not already on the property ladder. In Australia, 46% of people aged 25 to 34 have changed their family plans because of financial pressure. 15% have ruled out children altogether, not reduced their expected family size, ruled out permanently because of money. In Canada, a 2026 Economist's report described the decision not to have children in the following terms. When people say they want children but feel they cannot afford them, that is only a choice in the sense that a mugger telling you your money or your life is a choice. You're making a decision, but the options available to you have been arranged by someone else. The housing market, the childcare system, the wage structure, the cost of healthcare. None of these were chosen by the 28-year-old sitting in a rental apartment calculating whether they can afford a child. They arrived prearranged. The 28-year-old did not design the system. They are trying to afford to live inside it. Let's also talk about the specific economics of having an only child in 2026, because having one child instead of two is increasingly the compromise solution. The one-and-done decision is rising across every wealthy country in the surveys. People who wanted two have one. People who wanted three have one or two. People who wanted one have none. The compression of desired family size against actual family size is documented. And the economics of the one-child household are specific and worth naming. One child means the childcare cost lands on a household once rather than twice. One child means the bedroom requirement is one extra rather than two. One child means the career interruption is one period rather than multiple. But one child also means the economies of scale of multiple children do not apply. The larger family where costs are shared across siblings is a different financial model from the smaller one where every cost is per child with no distribution. Countries where family size has compressed toward one child are also countries where the cost per child tends to be highest because the infrastructure assumes some scale. The school trip costs the same whether you have one child or three. The uniform costs the same. The birthday party costs the same. The extracurricular activity costs the same. Fixed costs of childhood do not reduce when there is only one child to absorb them. The one and done economy is more expensive per child than the 2 or 3 economy. And yet, it is the rational choice for a growing number of households that cannot afford more. The birth rate data shows the output of all these individual calculations. 100 million individual household spreadsheets, each arriving at slightly different numbers, but collectively pointing in the same direction. One or none. Fewer than intended. Now let's talk about the motherhood penalty, because the motherhood penalty is real, documented, and consistent across every wealthy country we are discussing. When a woman has a child, her income typically falls, not because she becomes less capable, because the career interruption, the return to work at reduced hours, the promotions missed, the negotiations not taken, and the perception of reduced commitment all produce a financial penalty. The motherhood penalty has been measured at somewhere between 10 and 40% of lifetime earnings, depending on the country, the industry, and the number of children. Meanwhile, the fatherhood bonus, the documented tendency for fathers' earnings to increase after having children while mothers decrease, creates a household dynamic. That is not a personal arrangement between two people. It is a structural economic outcome that has been replicated across study after study and country after country. Having a child is financially expensive. For the woman in the partnership, it is also professionally expensive in ways that the birth certificate does not mention. Let's also name the economic consequence, because this video is about personal finance. But the aggregate of all these personal finance decisions produces a macroeconomic outcome. When fertility falls below replacement, the demographic structure of a society changes. Fewer working-age people supporting more retired people. The dependency ratio inverts. The pension systems that were designed for a pyramid, many young workers supporting few older ones, start running into trouble with an inverted pyramid. More retired people, fewer workers. Fewer workers means less tax revenue. Less tax revenue means less money for the services that were supposed to make having children easier. Less childcare subsidy, less housing support, less parental leave funding, all of which feeds back into the fertility rate. The demographic spiral is documented. It is what Japan has been living for 30 years. It is what South Korea is accelerating toward. It is what Germany and Italy are approaching. It is what Canada, Australia, and the UK are on the early stages of. The Bank of Korea projects the South Korean economy could begin shrinking by 2047. Not slow growth, negative growth, an economy contracting because there are not enough workers to sustain the productive capacity that the current population level requires. 20 years from now, the people who decided not to have children in 2026 will be the older generation that the smaller workforce is trying to support. This is not a judgment of the decision. It is a description of the arithmetic. The arithmetic of fewer births today is fewer workers in 25 years and fewer taxpayers supporting more pensioners in 40 years. Every country that is below replacement rate is having this conversation with its own future. The answer most of them give is immigration, which is a legitimate and documented partial solution. But it is not a solution to the underlying question of why people who want children cannot afford them. That question stays unanswered regardless of immigration levels. Now let's zoom out and look at what all of this adds up to globally. 1 in 5 people globally, across 14 countries surveyed by the UNFPA in 2025, do not expect to have the number of children they want, not because they do not want them, because economic and social barriers are stopping them. The UNFPA's report is explicit. Millions of people are unable to have the number of children they want, but not because they are rejecting parenthood. Economic and social barriers are stopping them. This distinction matters enormously. The political narrative around falling birth rates often implies a generational selfishness. Young people choosing careers over family, young people prioritizing travel and experiences over children. But the data is not describing selfishness. It is describing affordability. The surveys consistently show that people want children. They do not feel they can afford them. Those are different statements producing the same outcome. South Korea spent $270 billion and the fertility rate went down. Japan has tried free university tuition, monthly payments for third children, and subsidized leave. Minimal movement. Hungary offered lifetime tax exemptions for mothers of 4. The rate bumped briefly and settled back. Hungary, tax exemptions for life, and it settled back. Because the cash incentive arrives on top of a housing market, a childcare system, and a wage structure that are all pointing in the same direction. Downward. For young people, the incentive pushes slightly against the current. The current is stronger. Now let's close with what actually works. Because this video is the wealth records. And this channel always goes to the next step. The countries with the highest fertility rates in the wealthy world are not the ones that give the biggest cash payment per baby. They are the ones with the strongest infrastructure. France, Sweden, Norway, Australia to some extent, not because they pay people to have children, because the cost of having children is lower, because housing policy produces more affordable, family-sized homes, because childcare is subsidized to the point of accessibility, because parental leave is long enough and paid well enough that the career interruption is survivable, because healthcare does not add a cost column to the parenthood calculation. The fertility rate responds to the real cost of parenthood, not the stated desire. People already have the desire. The surveys keep showing they have the desire. What they do not have is the structural conditions that make the desire affordable to act on. You cannot save your way to a sustainable fertility rate. You cannot incentivize your way there either. You can only make the underlying conditions of parenthood affordable enough that the people who want to have children can actually afford to have them. Right now, in most wealthy countries, those conditions are not in place. The birth rate reflects this, every year, in every country, in the same direction. It's not magic, it's just math nobody walked you through. The math of why birth rates are falling in every wealthy country simultaneously, what having a child actually costs in 2026, and why the money governments keep throwing at the problem, is not working because it is not addressing the structure that produced the problem. Hit subscribe, The Wealth Records. The pattern is always there if you know where to look. I do.